kicked. I guess I showed you the thing or two about dirty work.
But there is one thing.
When this movie aired, America was in love with its stars. Dirty Work arrived in 1998 as a loud, unapologetic comedy that carried the rebellious humor of the late 90s. It was the kind of film that didn't care about fitting into the mainstream. It was outrageous, raunchy, and proudly absurd. But behind the laughter, this film has now become a time capsule. Because so many of the faces who gave life to its wild, unforgettable moments are no longer here, and their absences carry a heavier weight today than the punchlines they once delivered. At its center stood Norm Macdonald, whose dry delivery and understated timing made him a comedy legend. Alongside him was Chris Farley, larger than life both on screen and off, whose cameo in this film turned out to be his final bow. Then there was Warden, the seasoned veteran, who lent the kind of gravitas only a Hollywood elder could bring. Don Rickles, the insult comic with a wit sharper than any blade, appeared as a scathing presence whose humor left scars as much as it provoked laughter. And in a small yet striking cameo, Gary Coleman, once one of television's most recognizable child stars, brought his unmistakable persona into the chaos of dirty work. Each of these figures now belongs to history, their lives closed by time, but their stories are still alive with fascination, tragedy, and mystery. Dirty Work was never a box office smash. In fact, critics dismissed it as crude, uneven, and forgettable. But the passage of time has rewritten its place. Fans who once laughed at its outrageous schemes and revenge-driven plotlines now return to it with bittersweet eyes. It is not just a comedy anymore, it is a record of talent we lost too soon, and of legacies both triumphant and troubled. Watching it today feels less like a guilty pleasure and more like peering into a gallery of ghosts, each frame echoing with the voices of performers who once filled theaters and television screens with energy no camera could fully contain. The story of Dirty Work cannot be told without acknowledging the off-screen turmoil that shaped its cast. Norm Macdonald, brilliant but polarizing, often stood at odds with Hollywood's system, choosing integrity over popularity. Chris Farley, beloved yet tormented, fought personal battles that audiences never saw until it was too late. Warden, a stalwart of cinema, left behind decades of characters that defined a golden era. Don Rickles, who spent his life skewering others with biting jokes, proved that even legends of laughter are not immune to the silence of death. And Gary Coleman, whose meteoric rise as a child star masked years of legal and financial struggles, became a symbol of the price fame demands. Together, they form a mosaic of success, scandal, resilience, and heartbreak. When audiences revisit Dirty Work, they laugh at the absurd plots of revenge jobs gone wrong, but beneath that laughter lies a question that makes the film endure. What happened to these actors after the credits rolled? Where did their journeys lead them when the spotlight dimmed and the audience went home? Some achieved respect and admiration, others were consumed by battles no one could win, and each left behind a story worth telling. Their lives remind us that comedy is often born from pain, and that the bright light of fame always casts long shadows. This video will take you through those stories, of triumph, of tragedy, and of the strange, unpredictable ways Hollywood remembers its stars. Because Dirty Work may have been dismissed as a simple comedy, but the lives of those who filled its screen carry weight far beyond the laughter. The real story is not just about the jokes that made us smile, but about the people behind them, now gone, yet never forgotten. And that is where we begin. Norm Macdonald, the deadpan rebel who laughed at Hollywood's rules. Norm Macdonald was born on October 17, 1959, in Quebec City, Canada, into a family that valued education and discipline. His childhood seemed ordinary, but within him grew an extraordinary sense of humor defined by irony, understatement, and a unique way of turning silence into a punchline. By the time he reached his late 30s, he was already a household name through Saturday Night Live, where his dry delivery on the Weekend Update desk made him both beloved and controversial. He was 39 when he starred in Dirty Work, a project that reflected his quirky comedic voice and unwillingness to bow to mainstream expectations. In the film, Macdonald played Mitch Weaver, a down-and-out character who creates a revenge-for-hire business with his best friend. The role was tailor-made for his personality, deadpan, slightly detached, and yet deeply funny. Critics may have dismissed the movie, but fans of Norm recognized his fingerprints on every scene. His performance wasn't about exaggerated expressions or loud antics, it was about the way he could let a pause hang in the air until it became the joke itself. Watching him in Dirty Work was watching the essence of his style, quiet chaos that made you laugh because it felt both absurd and oddly true. After the film, Macdonald's career remained unpredictable. He starred in The Norm Show, voiced characters in animated series, and continued performing stand-up with an honesty that often defied Hollywood's polish. He was never fully embraced by the industry because he didn't play by its rules, but that became part of his charm. He could make audiences laugh while making executives nervous, a rare balance that only someone fearless could achieve. Yet behind the comedy was a private man who carried his struggles quietly. For nearly a decade, he battled leukemia in silence, never letting the public know, never inviting pity. When he died on September 14, 2021, at the age of 61, the world was shocked not just by the loss, but by the courage it took to keep that fight hidden. His passing revealed the kind of integrity that defined his life. He gave his audience laughter, but he kept his pain to himself. To revisit Dirty Work now is to see a man who never compromised, whose humor was entirely his own, and whose absence makes the film far more poignant than it was ever intended to be. Norm Macdonald may have left too soon, but his voice, quiet, sharp, and unforgettable, still lingers in every line he delivered. Jack Warden, the veteran whose gravitas anchored Dirty Work. Jack Warden was born on September 18, 1920, in Newark, New Jersey, into a working-class family that knew more about survival than glamour. His path to Hollywood was far from conventional. Before ever stepping on a film set, he lived a life of hard experiences, serving in the United States Navy during World War II and later in the Merchant Marine, even working as a boxer to get by. Those years gave him the rugged presence and lived-in wisdom that audiences came to recognize on screen. By the time Dirty Work came around in 1998, Warden was already 77 years old and carried with him the weight of decades in Hollywood. In the film, he played Pops McKenna, the elderly father of Artie Lange's character and the moral compass in the chaos of Norm Macdonald's revenge-for-hire antics. Warden didn't need to do much, his voice, his stare, his every gesture gave the film a grounding it desperately needed. Among the whirlwind of raunchy humor and absurd revenge schemes, Pops was the heart. He gave Dirty Work a sense of sincerity, and his seasoned presence reminded audiences that beneath the jokes there could still be warmth and dignity. Jack Warden's career had already been a remarkable one long before this film. He had appeared in 12 Angry Men, 1957, Heaven Can Wait, 1978, and The Verdict, 1982, establishing himself as one of the most reliable and respected character actors in Hollywood. He earned 2 Academy Award nominations for Best Supporting Actor and was beloved for his ability to bring authenticity to any role, no matter how small. His longevity in the business was a testament to both his talent and his adaptability, moving from gritty dramas to light comedies without ever losing credibility. Behind the screen, Warden was known as a private man, less interested in fame than in doing the work. He never pursued the celebrity lifestyle, and perhaps that is why his performances always felt so real. His final years were marked by declining health, and he passed away on July 19, 2006, at the age of 85 due to heart and kidney failure. His death closed a chapter on a life that had seen war, struggle, triumph, and a steady rise in Hollywood without ever becoming trapped by its illusions. When audiences rewatch Dirty Work today, Warden's role is more than just a supporting character. It is a reminder of an era when Hollywood still had men who carried the scars of real life into their performances. His presence gave the film depth it otherwise would have lacked, and his absence today makes his work feel like a precious relic of a fading time. Jack Warden wasn't the star of Dirty Work, but he was its backbone, and without him, the story would not have carried the same heart. Chris Farley, the wild comedian whose final bow came too soon. Chris Farley was born on February 15, 1964, in Madison, Wisconsin, into a large Irish Catholic family that embraced humor and storytelling as part of daily life. From an early age, his energy seemed boundless, often leaving those around him both exhausted and delighted. After honing his comedic craft at the famed Second City Theater in Chicago, Farley exploded onto the national stage as part of the Saturday Night Live cast in the early 1990s. His sketches, most famously the overzealous motivational speaker Matt Foley, turned him into a household name. By the time Dirty Work began production, Farley was only 33 years old, already adored by millions, but carrying struggles that fame could not cure. In Dirty Work, Farley appeared in a small cameo role as Jimmy, a character with a disfigured nose whose misadventures brought absurd physical comedy to the story. The role was short, but his presence was unforgettable. Every twitch, every shout, every exaggerated reaction reminded audiences why Farley had become such a beloved figure. What makes his appearance haunting is that it became the last time fans would see him in a film released after his death. His cameo, though brief, has since taken on the weight of finality, a closing act to a career that was never allowed to reach its true potential. Off-screen, Farley's life was far more complicated than his audience ever imagined. He wrestled with health problems, the pressure of fame, and battles with substance use that shadowed much of his career. Those close to him often described him as a deeply kind man with insecurities that no amount of laughter could silence. His friends, including Norm Macdonald and David Spade, tried to help him, but his struggles were overwhelming. On December 18, 1997, Chris Farley was found dead in his Chicago apartment from a drug-related complication. He was only 33 years old, and his passing sent shockwaves through Hollywood and his loyal fans across the world. Today, watching Dirty Work is a bittersweet experience for those who loved Farley. His cameo may be small, but knowing it was his last makes it impossible to see without feeling a pang of sadness. The wild energy he brought to comedy was unique, a whirlwind of chaos and joy that no one has ever been able to replicate. His early death became one of Hollywood's great losses, a reminder of the fragile line between the laughter we see on screen and the struggles that remain hidden behind it. Chris Farley's short life was both a triumph and a tragedy, and Dirty Work preserves his final spark of madness for those who still miss him. Don Rickles, the master of insults who left the world laughing. Don Rickles was born on May 8, 1926, in Queens, New York, to a Jewish family of modest means. As a young man, he dreamed of being a dramatic actor, but destiny had other plans. After serving in the United States Navy during World War II, Rickles pursued acting only to discover that his quick wit and sharp tongue could command a room better than any script. By the 1950s, he had reinvented himself as a comedian with a style that no one had seen before, biting, relentless, and mercilessly funny. Audiences soon learned that to sit in his crowd was to risk being roasted, and Rickles became known as the Merchant of Venom, though offstage he was said to be one of the kindest men in Hollywood. In Dirty Work, Rickles appeared in a memorable cameo as Mr. Hamilton, a cantankerous theater manager whose insults cut as deeply as they entertained. It was a perfect use of his persona. An authority figure whose cruelty became the punchline itself. His short screen time left a lasting impression, because his style was so instantly recognizable, the smirk, the raised eyebrow, and the ability to tear someone down while still making the audience erupt in laughter. Even in a raunchy comedy like Dirty Work, Rickles' cameo stood out as vintage insult humor, reminding audiences why he had been a legend for decades. Rickles' career spanned over 60 years, with countless television appearances, comedy albums, and film roles. He was a regular guest on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson and became a close friend to stars like Frank Sinatra, who often invited him to perform in Las Vegas. His humor was not without controversy. Some found his insults too harsh for modern sensibilities, but his defenders argued that his equal opportunity mockery was always meant with love. He was honored with numerous awards late in life, including an Emmy for his documentary Mr. Warmth. The Don Rickles Project. Rickles passed away on April 6, 2017, at the age of 90, from kidney failure. His death marked the end of an era for a style of comedy that may never return in the same form. To see him in Dirty Work today is to witness a relic of that golden age of insult comedy, a reminder of a performer who could make people laugh until they cried by saying the very things no one else dared to. Don Rickles was more than just a comedian, he was a cultural force, and even in his smallest appearances, he left an imprint too large to forget. Gary Coleman, the child star whose fame turned into a lifetime struggle. Gary Coleman was born on February 8, 1968, in Zion, Illinois, and from his earliest years his life was shaped by both extraordinary opportunity and unshakable hardship. Diagnosed with a congenital kidney condition that stunted his growth and required lifelong medical care, he never grew taller than 4 feet 8 inches. Yet his small stature and expressive charm became the very things that launched him to fame. By the late 1970s, he had become a household name through the sitcom Diff'rent Strokes, where his wide-eyed innocence and famous catchphrase, "Watch you talkin' 'bout, Willis," turned him into one of television's most recognizable child stars. He was barely a teenager when he reached levels of fame most actors only dream about, but with that fame came pressures no child should have to bear. In Dirty Work, Coleman made a cameo as himself, poking fun at his own celebrity in the chaotic world of Norm Macdonald's revenge-for-hire escapades. His brief appearance was played for laughs, yet it carried an undertone of irony. By the late 1990s, Coleman's career had largely stalled, and his name was more often tied to lawsuits, financial troubles, and the darker side of child stardom than to acting triumphs. Seeing him in the film was a reminder of both how beloved he had once been and how far he had fallen from the heights of his youth. After Dirty Work, Coleman's life continued to unravel in the public eye. He filed lawsuits against his adoptive parents and former manager, claiming they had mismanaged his earnings, and despite winning the case, much of his fortune was gone. To make ends meet, he worked ordinary jobs, from security guard to video game store clerk, all while facing tabloid headlines that mocked his struggles. His health issues persisted, and his personal life was marked by turbulence and controversy, including a tumultuous marriage that brought further media attention. On May 28, 2010, Gary Coleman passed away at the age of 42 after suffering a brain hemorrhage caused by a fall in his Utah home. His death shocked those who had grown up with him on their television screens, a tragic close to a life that had been defined by both extraordinary joy and relentless battles. Watching Dirty Work now, his cameo feels like a bittersweet echo of what once was, the mischievous child star whose laughter once lit up millions of homes, reduced to a fleeting moment of self-parody in a comedy few expected to outlive its era. Gary Coleman's story is one of Hollywood's starkest reminders of how fame, especially for children, can be both a blessing and a curse, leaving behind not just memories of laughter but also lingering questions about the cost of celebrity. When audiences first saw Dirty Work in 1998, the film was simply a wild and unapologetic comedy. It was not hailed as a masterpiece, nor did it dominate the box office, but time has given it a new and haunting meaning. Today, it stands as a cinematic scrapbook of 5 performers whose lives, careers, and legacies remind us that comedy often masks fragility and that fame is never a shield against tragedy. Norm Macdonald, with his razor-sharp deadpan, left us with a final testimony of integrity and originality. Jack Warden, the veteran whose presence gave the film a soul, departed as one of Hollywood's most enduring character actors. Chris Farley, whose cameo burst with chaotic brilliance, offered audiences a heartbreaking farewell in the last role of his life. Don Rickles, the insult king, showed that even in the briefest of appearances he could still dominate a scene with laughter. And Gary Coleman, once America's beloved child star, left behind a life as complicated as it was captivating, his cameo serving as a reminder of both his glory and his struggle. Together, these 5 names make Dirty Work far more than a raunchy late 90s comedy. The film has become a window into the fragility of human lives lived under the harsh spotlight of fame. Each man carried with him a different story, stories of triumph, of scandal, of personal battles fought in silence. Some exited the stage quietly, while others left suddenly, shocking the world that adored them. Yet all of them remain etched into the fabric of this movie, transforming it from a cult comedy into a bittersweet memorial of Hollywood legends. Looking back, the laughter of Dirty Work is now layered with nostalgia and sorrow. It is a reminder that behind every joke is a person whose journey does not always end in applause. To watch it today is to remember not just the comedy but also the cost of a life in the spotlight. These actors are gone, but their voices, faces, and energy still live within the film, and in that way they remain with us. If you found their stories moving, consider subscribing to our channel. There are countless other untold legacies waiting to be rediscovered, stories of stars who once lit up the screen but whose lives carried shadows just as powerful as their light. By remembering them, we honor not only the laughter they gave us but also the human truths they left behind.